The first person that I interviewed is Mike Long, who is part of the Apollo 13 recovery, and just that's before like rescue swimmers were a thing. So it's kind of these early folks, and the common or the mutual respect is just how crazy we all think each other were.
Studio 61A aboard Battleship, Iowa, it's Scuttlebutt, the official podcast of the National Museum of the Surface Navy in affiliation with the Surface Navy Association's Battleship, Iowa chapter. And we are back with the second half of our podcast with Navy aviation swimmer and Everest climber Brian Dickinson. In the room today, we've got Development Director Kyle Aubie, COO Mike Getcher, and me, Marianne Fengler. I run comms. And from Seattle, Brian Dickinson. Let's get back into this conversation.
But part of what we do is focused around skill bridge and helping transitioning service members come in and get familiarized with the civilian world. From your end, how do you prepare yourself for such a drastic transition from literal life and death situations to the idea of potentially I'm going to sit behind a desk? Or for you, maybe know the answer, climbing mountains, you're kind of pursuing that adrenaline rush. Maybe there was no real option to go work at a desk job. But what was that like for you leaving the military?
Yeah, it's tough. That's as I've interviewed others that are transitioning now. I mean, that's a huge thing. You're ready to jump on a grenade for your buddy, and now you're worried about a Zoom call. It just doesn't translate very well. Yeah. I'll back it up though. As far as adrenaline, I think that's a common false thought of mountaineering. Things are so slow moving in high altitude mountaineering that adrenaline is the last thing. And rock climbing, different things, rappelling, different things like that, you get some adrenaline rush from that. But from mountaineering, it is slow moving. I mean, it's like 5 seconds between every step when you're up there in the death zone. And I know just most people don't know that, so I always like to educate.
Good clarification, seriously.
But yeah, how do you transition? A lot of people don't, and they really struggle. And I think that's where depression, and that's where I think a lot of veterans or a lot of service people are dealing with PTSD. Well, they're not dealing with it because they're still active, they're still operating. It's when you step outside of that, and now you have time to think, and now your whole perspective has changed. That's when you allow the evil to creep in, and it's been there the whole time. So I really encourage people to get help and to talk about the things they've done, and just to find a safe space. And if medication is the right direction, I mean, it can be a lifesaver. For me, I don't know if I did do anything to prepare. I got out, I started working in the high-tech industry, got my master's, my MBA, and then I think there was a point where it's like I need to be doing something that's challenging myself physically and mentally, and that's outdoors, because I was working, and I still work behind a desk, and I have to find that fix. It's nature therapy. It's just getting out. And over time, I'm 50 now. It's I'm all kinds of broken. You don't operate in the back of a helicopter for that long, and jump and being hoisted up, and just the systems that we use, the harnesses that had no leg supports, everything else. It's just, everyone does that job, is jacked up to some level. Right. So that just means as I get older, if I climb Everest, I jump out of helicopters, if I'm still getting older and trying to do these things, it's going to just spiral me into a place I don't want to go. Yeah. So it really is just being real with life, and, finding joys in other areas. And you can still have outdoor therapy, going for hikes and different things. I just went around Mount Rainier with my wife this weekend, and And it was great. I didn't go to the top. That was totally fine. I did talk about wanting to go to the top, but just being down, at like 5,000, 6,000 feet, just doing gentle hikes with my wife, it's like, it was great. And just finding joy in things like that.
Sure.
That's cool.
So this new book is not just your story, it's other people's stories. What inspired you to do it that way?
Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning that. So, and that was super important to me. As I've been asked that question of, how didn't I panic on Everest? I've put a lot of thought into, my military training. What I didn't want was to write a book about me, because there's no books on U.S. Navy aviation rescue swimmers. So I thought it was a good opportunity, and I have a good platform to do that. But I wanted to talk about the history of it, the training, to abstract different areas within the training and experience to help other people in life that are panicking, whether it's finances, relationships, the world, right? Everyone's panicking at some level. But I didn't want it to be a book about me. I've included some of my own experiences, but I wanted it to be a book about us, because this is a small elite group, and there's so many incredible untold stories that exist out there, and there's so many more that I could capture. I mean, I interviewed over 30 existing and former aviation rescue swimmers, and just the stories are incredible. Like my personal experiences, I'm not that interesting. Like when you hear these other stories, it was awesome, and it was a very therapeutic one, just talking to these folks that have been through these pretty horrific and traumatic events, whether it's helicopter crashes or just pretty intense rescues, and the fact that a lot of them haven't really talked much about it, and just to have that interaction. But what I found also, what I wasn't expecting, is it uncovered, a box that I had closed, decades ago when I got out. So I actually had to pause at a point and get some help myself and deal with my own personal struggles, things that, I just was unaware of. You could see the responses of them, but I didn't really know where they were coming from. So that's why I wanted to include others, because there's a lot of incredible stories out there, and I think people are really going to enjoy some of these. And there's so many more. So I don't know if there will be like I told my wife, so my book is Calm in the Chaos. The next one could be Calmest in the Chaos, and then calmer.
Yeah.
More calm in the chaos, part 2.
Maybe it's something about the naval aviation community, because during LA Fleet Week here at the Battleship, things subjectively are crazy. There's things that go wrong, which objectively are very minute, but everything ends up being kind of the biggest deal.
Yeah.
And so our now transitioned Skillbridge intern, I was standing with him, and something had happened, and people are losing their minds, and he just looks at me and goes, "Not everything has to be a crisis. Just take a deep breath and look at the problem and work to solve it." And that is a very kind of adjacent way of looking at things compared to your story and everything. But it's right. It's being able to calm yourself down, look at the situation, and plot a course of action. Like you don't learn that in the civilian communities.
No, he's a Seahawk pilot too, so he has a little bit of
you don't learn that. I learned that on boats. Having been a merchant marine officer. Definitely. And when everything is your responsibility, I was chief engineer on a vessel. You learn how to prioritize, and you learn what's important and what isn't. But it's really powerful.
There's an interesting transition too. Coming from also boats, you get into those situations where you do find that moment of calm. I certainly would panic if I were in the water. I'm not going to tell you I wouldn't, but things break, things go wrong, and it's almost like time slows down a little bit, and you have to deal with that. But then when you get off the boat, or you get out of that crisis situation, you kind of
have withdrawals. You don't really know how to exist in society without that level of extreme and intensity. And is that something that you get into with these guys too, about, how they have learned to readjust to a not having to be calm in the chaos, or less chaos?
I think there's probably a couple in there. So with the stories that I included, they're all over the map. I mean, it's not just like man overboard rescues. I mean, there's some intense things. There's some, like overland rescues and different things. Definitely had those conversations. But the rescues that I included, it is mapped to lessons that teach you to be calm in the chaos. So they're very, very specific of, situational awareness. Mm-hmm. Now a rescue where, this was definitely a case. So it demonstrates that. And my wife, as a counselor, I wanted her as a co-writer, but she ended up being a contributor on it. So even though her name's not on the front of the book, she's a major contributor because she takes a softer approach as opposed to, former, special ops, military, just get over it, just do it. I'm a little more like just, straight to the point, where she's a little softer. So I think it's a really good blend. So I think a lot of, not just former military, but I think a lot of people will benefit just from the lessons and the delivery of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredibly valuable.
That's cool. But if you ever make it out here, we'll have to show you the Hup helicopter. You talk about aircraft. It's a flying beer can. Literally, we have one on deck. We restored it.
So World War II, Korean War.
Korean War,
era.
1951, and they're fascinating. I actually met several of the family members, the Piasecki founder, that the guy that famous in helicopters who designed those things. It's a twin rotor. It's completely manual. It has a small radial motor. It's 9 cylinders. It just blows me away that people would fly them at all. And those were the early rescue helicopters. And if you look at it, in fact, I've got a book. I think it's Dale McKinnon's book above my desk about the rescue scenarios from the Korean War, because they were doing plane guard off the coast of Korea. And just a brief note, purely technical, that helicopter, to winch somebody aboard is not like the helicopters of today, the Seahawk. It's literally you roll the right side pilot seat back, and the floor just opens up.
What?
And there's a winch literally to the right of the pilot.
What?
Yeah, it's wild. And we have some images of it. So it really is an extraordinary thing. And there's great history to just that. And forgive the technical side, but it's just fascinating. And I admire what you've done. And
so I actually included a story because it was kind of the first overwater rescue was off of Korea. So talked about that and exactly what you're saying, because they didn't have rescue swimmers back then. There was a case where they opted to get lowered into the water and actually bring up the victim and then remain in the water. And, it's pretty miraculous. But then even call it CSAR back then over in Korea, utilizing those helicopters, and it's wild. So the first person that I interviewed is Mike Long, who is part of the Apollo 13 recovery. And just that's before rescue swimmers were a thing. So it's kind of, these early folks, and the common or the mutual respect is just how crazy we all think each other were. Wow. Because even nowadays, I've been out since 99, different helicopter models, doing a lot of, different, more specialized mission sets, some of the stuff just the equipment we were using, everything else. It's different. It's great to see the direction and, the visibility that it's getting. But I've interviewed Bill Rutledge from HAL 3, from Vietnam. He's one of the most decorated veterans there was, just, 2,000 different mission sets and getting shot in the back as he's got carrying a guy through rice paddies and then straps him to a skeg and, lights up the Viet Cong with the... M60 and just and this guy's telling me like, oh man, you guys doing water rescues are crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just an amazing person. And then he was reading my book Blind Descent, and we were talking, and he ended up passing away like a month later. And just such a gift to just have these conversations and share these stories that just haven't been told. And just honored to be tell these stories. And I know there's so many more, and there's going to be tons of rescue swimmers out there being like, hey, how about my story? And like, I encourage everyone, if you have stories to tell them, to be on great podcasts like this, because if we just have those experiences within us, it's it lives and dies with us. And I think a lot of people can get a lot from it. Just it depends. It's not about telling a story just to show how cool we are and all this other stuff. That's not the case, and that's why you don't hear a lot of these stories, because it's definitely an elite group of humble individuals.
It's certainly been a gift to have you on the podcast today.
Well, and you mentioned him coming out here, so Brian and I have been sort of plotting about the potential of getting a book signing going and having him out here for the why am I blanking on the word? It's not premiere of the book. The book launch. So we'll take that offline, but we're going to tease it right now that potentially we'll have him out here to promote his book.
That'd be great. We could do it on that helicopter you're talking about.
Right? Exactly. We could. We totally could.
Yeah, it's actually pretty neat. Love to show it. I still can't believe people flew in those things. When I say beer can, I'm not joking. I mean, it's not the airframe that you guys were using, some 40 years later.
Nuts.
Literally, it's a beer can thickness. I'm not joking. I mean, you can actually depress your finger into the side of the fuselage.
I was about to say, there was a smudge on it when I walked by the other day, and went to kind of get it out like you would with your car, and it almost indented, and I was like, oh my gosh.
It is not.
Don't break the helicopter.
Yeah.
It's a beer can with a motor. So, but it's fascinating, and I huge kudos to everybody that's been doing that kind of job, and just huge appreciation for that, and for you.
Absolutely.
Well, Brian, apart from potentially doing a book signing here, when does your book come out, and where can people get it?
So it comes out actually 3 weeks from today, October 29th. And it's anywhere that you buy books. If you prefer Amazon, then it's definitely there. My website is briandickinson.net, so I always keep it updated.
We'll have that in the description.
You can get it anywhere.
Cool.
Well, thank you for joining us and sharing just a piece of these amazing stories, because I mean, there are so many more, I'm sure, that are within these books, and so definitely have to look into those and kind of read up and learn more and be inspired. So
share your story.
It's great speaking with you.
Share your story. That's one of the messages from us.
Yep. Right. Thank you for having me on. It was great.
Really
I love the venue. This is perfect. Feel at home.
It's kind of fun. All right. Well, thanks to all our listeners for tuning into another episode of Scuttlebutt. If you have, as usual, any feedback, comments, questions, anything you'd like to tell us, drop them in the comments or send an email to podcast@labattleship.com, podcast@labattleship, and we will get you some answers, and go get Brian's book. I've gotten a little preview of it, and it's like I was up too late last night. That's all I'm going to say. So anyway, thank you, and we'll catch you on the next Scuttlebutt.